So now we will talk about what Palmer and Perkins has to say about balance of power theory and how they have discussed it in their book International Relations. So they say that a realist may insist that all states are driven by an urge to enlarge their territory and enhance their prestige. And a realist may also say that military power in the hands of other state restrains them. We know that realists insist on power, on especially on military power, whereas idealists believed in human goodness, in they believe that man is basically peaceful, and they also believe that public opinion plays a role in determining the foreign policy of a country. But as far as realists are concerned, for them, national power can be used for peacekeeping and peacemaking, and as well as for war making. So, power is the main element for realists, and balance of power insists on creating that balance among states. Now, when we talk of balance of power, we can see that it involves uh, utilization or arrangement of national power in a certain way. And this is what is done by collective security also. In fact, Quincy Wright pointed out that while other factors have had an influence, the concept of balance of power provides the most general explanation for the oscillation of peace and war in Europe since the 30 Years' War. यूरोप के राज्यों के बीच में जो युद्ध और शांति का युग चला, उसको एक्सप्लेन करने में शक्ति संतुलन का सिद्धांत प्रयोग में लाया जा सकता है. The principle of balance of power was most fully applied in the 18th and 19th century, and it was written into several treaties of 18th century, and it is still a basic principle of international relations. Although questions are raised on its relevance, and it is asked whether balance of power is still relevant or not, and uh, has collective security replaced balance of power? These questions are asked, and we will discuss it later on uh, as to which theory is prevalent today, balance of power or collective security. Now we must know as to what does balance of power mean. The term has been given so many definitions that it is said that it is almost impossible to define it. However, Ines Cloud has observed the trouble with the balance of power is that it has no meaning, but that it has too many meanings. So, in the light of this, we should examine the various meanings, various definitions which have been given to balance of power. Usually, it is said that balance of power is equal to equilibrium. When the weights in the scales are equal, balance results. And when it is applied to the word of sovereign states, uncontrolled by effective supranational agencies, the concept of balance of power assumes that through shifting alliances and countervailing pressures, no one power or combination of powers will be allowed to grow so strong as to threaten the security of the rest. George Schwarzenberger has spoken of it, and he terms it as an equilibrium or a certain amount of stability in international relations. Morgenthau, a very well known in international relations, described it as only a particular manifestation of a general social principle. Professor Sidney B. Fay says that balance of power means such a just equilibrium in power among the members of the family of nations as will prevent any one of them from becoming sufficiently strong to enforce its will upon the others. So we can see that balance of power has been defined, that no single state should be allowed to gain that much power that it influences the decisions of other states. In his book Politics Among Nations, Morgenthau stated that the term balance of power can be used in four senses. First, as a policy aimed at a certain state of affairs. Secondly, as an actual state of affairs. Thirdly, as an approximately equal distribution of power. And fourthly, as any distribution of power. But he added that whenever the term is used without qualification, it refers to an actual state of affairs in which power is distributed among several nations with approximate equality. Now, what are the characteristics of balance of power? Several characteristics of balance of power have been given by Palmer and Perkins. First is the term suggests equilibrium, balance, but we see that almost the only certain thing about history is disequilibrium. States are always striving to achieve power, to expand power, and so instead of finding equilibrium, they tend to end with disequilibrium. Secondly, in practice, balance of power system have proved to be temporary and unstable because again we know that states strive to increase power, and so any state of balance is very transient, it is very temporary. Deutsch and Singer pointed out that no balance of power system has lasted longer than a few centuries. Thirdly, balance of power, according to Nicholas Spikeman, is not a gift of the gods, but it has to be achieved by the active intervention of man, which means that balance of power does not arise on its own. It has to be created, it has to be achieved by the states. States have to make it happen, they have to work towards it. Fourthly, the balance of power has generally tended to favor status quo. But to be effective, a balance of power policy must be changing and it must be dynamic. It cannot be supporting status quo. Fifth characteristic of balance of power, as Norman Palmer and Perkins write in their book, it is, they say that it is difficult for a nation to tell when a balance of power has been achieved. The only real test of balance of power is that of war. And resorting to war not only upsets the balance but also creates the very condition which a balance of power policy is supposedly designed to prevent. Balance of power helps prevent war. But if we have to know whether balance of power exists, then war-like situation should be created. Sixthly, balance of power offers both an objective and a subjective approach, which means Martin White suggested that the difference is that between the historian and statesman. A historian gives an objective view of balance of power, while a statesman gives a subjective view of balance of power. How we can explain it? The historian will say that there is a balance when the opposing groups seem to him to be equal in power. And the statesman will say that there is a balance when he thinks that his side is stronger than the other. So we can see that the historian takes the objective view, whereas the statesman takes the subjective view of balance of power. A statesman is interested in balance of power only when he sees that balance of power is in their favor. And so we see that nations which play the balance of power game seek not a balance but an imbalance. They are always trying to tilt the balance in their favor. Quincy Wright, who is a great authority on balance of power and whose oft-quoted work, A Study of War, contains one of the best contemporary analysis of the theory and practice of balance of power. And he writes a lot uh, about the objective and subjective view of balance of power. Seventhly, the balance of power has not been primarily a device for preserving the peace. In fact, through tilting the balance of power in their own favor, states are striving to create disequilibrium, to create a situation of war, because war becomes inevitable when there is disequilibrium. The eighth characteristic of balance of power system is uh, one which is for great states. Although small ones are vitally concerned in the outcome, they are more often victims of balance of power. And at best, they may be described as spectators rather than players in the game of balance of power. Collectively, they may be able to exert some influence upon even the most powerful states, as we can see that many states of Asia and Africa chose non-alignment after Second World War, so that they can exert some influence, some power on the two blocks during the Cold War period. Another case may be cited of Nepal. Nepal, for example, may be said to be following a kind of Himalayan balance of power policy vis-a-vis its great neighbors, India and Communist China. It is, in fact, a buffer state between the two states, and Nepal has adopted a policy in which it has tried to balance both India and China, and has tried to uh, achieve most out of these two states. The ninth characteristic of balance of power is that the theory seems to be a policy that is suitable neither for democracy nor for dictatorship. Unless geographical, political, military, and other considerations are peculiarly favorable, a democracy is generally a reluctant player and a poor leader in the balance of power game. It is deeply concerned with power politics only in periods of crisis. A dictatorship, on the other hand, is usually interested in dominating the contest, in establishing rules to suit its own convenience and in gathering in all the rewards. Tenth characteristic of balance of power is many commentators insist that the balance of power is largely inoperative under present conditions. This is why we had said that today it is questioned whether balance of power is relevant or not. Because after 1945, it is said that the theory of collective security is used and not that of balance of power. United Nations was made, and United Nations is based on the principle of collective security, which is one for all and all for one. Collective security means that states have to identify as to who is aggressor, and then all states have to stand behind the state on which aggression has been made. States should rise above their national interests. They should, uh, despite being friends with the aggressor state, they should rise against, they should uh, participate in any activity which is taken by the United Nations against that aggressor state, which is something very difficult, and it is against national interest and usually does not happen. That is why we debate whether collective security is working, or whether balance of power has become irrelevant. All these questions we can discuss later on. So these are the 10 characteristics of balance of power which have been given by Palmer and Perkins. And we see that in this theory of balance of power, there is a role of balancer also. When we discuss post Cold Second World War politics, we see that although world was divided into two groups, and it was a bipolar world, yet there was another group which was acting as balancer, and we can term non-alignment or non-aligned countries as such group. So there are some states which may be acting as a balancer also. Uh, Today, when we see that the world has become multipolar, from bipolarity, we graduated to multipolarity during the new Cold War. And then with the end of Cold War, we became a unipolar world. And in the 21st century, we find that uh, America is declining, and China is said to be rising. And so the world has again become multipolar. In fact, it is a complex word today because it is difficult to identify uh, as to which countries have become the poles of power in today's world. So we will be discussing some more about the modern world, the today's world, uh, in context of balance of power and collective security. As far as history goes, we see that balance of power uh, has been working since time immemorial. In ancient India too, we had seen that Kautilya had given the theory of Mandal. His Mandal theory is usually termed as a balance of power theory. So it isn't that balance of power is an invention of the modern times. It was something which was present even in 4th century BC, as it is evident from Kautilya's Arthashastra, where it was described. In China, Sun Tzu, in his book on war, has given this theory beside Thucydides uh, and Aristotle, etc. They have all given this theory, although the word balance of power may not have been used. So balance of power is considered to be one of the oldest theories of international relations in the world. और